Welcome to Downtown Faith. I'm the founding pastor here at Downtown Faith, but this by no means happens because of one person. It happens because of teams of leaders and volunteers that are passionate about creating space to discuss life and faith. And I just want to say, there's always room on those teams for people. Maybe you have a passion, maybe you have a gifting, maybe you have an idea about how to create this space even better. We welcome those ideas, we want those feedback, and we'd love for you to join a team and in some way get connected and get involved. One of the best ways that we found for people to really connect to a faith community is through serving with people in that faith community, right side by side, not just outside of our walls like we do at our laundry project or something, but also inside the walls right here on a Sunday morning. And we have lots of teams. I just want to encourage you to get involved and to get plugged in and use your talents, your abilities. Maybe you feel like your only ability is availability. That's okay. There's a team for you, and we want to encourage you to get involved. We're in our series, A Follower of Jesus. And we're asking ourselves this question: what is a Christian? And last week we looked at some of the ideas behind it. We answered this question kind of to ourselves. We looked at it in various different ways, and we said that maybe culturally a definition for a lot of people when it comes to Christian, and it's kind of what I gathered as I've had conversations with people through our podcast, the Downtown Faith Discussion, or through sitting at our tables, or through our pub theology, or our conversations downtown where people find out I'm a pastor, and then the questions automatically turn to, what kind of pastor, and people want to share their views on things. And this is kind of the cultural definition that I came up with based on those conversations. As a Christian is a hypocritical, power-hungry, homophobic, transphobic, judgmental, science-denying, uneducated, politically conservative, religious bigot who's only concerned with dictating a preferred set of ethics and morality to the world. And this may not be your definition, it may not be where you land, but maybe it is. Maybe something like this is, or a piece of it is kind of how you view Christianity or Christians, and maybe it's because of your experience, and maybe some of you in here, you don't even want to refer to yourself as that, and maybe that's been an obstacle for you to following Jesus, has been the idea that you would be considered a Christian, and you don't like the definition or maybe the way it's viewed or the things that people attach to that label. And we said that in our idea worth discussing throughout the series, we simply said this: Jesus wasn't concerned with converting people to Christianity. He was passionate about helping people follow Him in faith. You see, Jesus didn't use the word Christian. That term we learned last week came from the outside in. That there was another term, there was another word that was much clearer that Jesus used, and that the people that followed Jesus and the term that they used, because Jesus wasn't here to start a new religion. He was here to start something new, and it was about people who followed Him. And so we said where Christian gets muddy, the term disciple gets crystal clear. Where the term Christian gets muddy, and there's a lot of people who believe a lot of things, and they're on both sides of the spectrum of a lot of different arguments in it, whether it be politically or religiously or ethically, that disciple gets very clear and becomes a much clearer term. You see, a disciple is simply a follower, a learner, someone who reproduces not just the teaching, but the life of the person that they follow. They simply ask this: how would you do this? Okay, then that's what I'm going to do, right? And they're going to trust their decision, their worldview, their perspective on life and maybe their teachings and whatnot. And so we said that overall, a follower is greater than a convert, right? Like while many religious groups are interested in converting people to their religion, that Jesus wasn't starting a new religion. He actually came right in the face of religiosity in His time. He was starting something new. He was starting this group of followers of Himself that He believed could change the world and would change the world because of what He did. And we're gonna look at that a little deeper, because maybe you've rejected Christianity, but you've not necessarily rejected Jesus, right? And so it's a really important thing that when you're looking at things, I would say any movement or any group maybe of people, is to really go back to the original. I used to work in the world of copiers I was a copier delivery person until I dropped one off the back of a truck, and then I was no longer a copier delivery person. But one of the things, like if people were having struggles with their copies coming out clearly, what we would always tell them to do is, well, where's the original? Where's the original? What does the original look like? Because sometimes people will like make a copy of 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 a copy, and over time things get diluted or things get changed little by little if you're copy. So I want to look back today at the original so we can get a clearer view. The people who originally began to follow Jesus and where this thing church started off, and look at how did they understand what it meant to be a follower of Jesus. How did they understand what their life would mean and would look like as they followed Jesus? Because again, they weren't concerned about being Christians. That was from the outside looking in. They were disciples. They were followers. And they had a clear path for that. And maybe for you today, this will help clear a path for you. And that's what I want to do because what I believe is that when we follow Jesus in faith, things begin to change in our life. And that's what we want for every single person. So if you look at the original, we're kind of look at it a little bit. If you look at the original church, there was like two things that they had. They had a belief and they had a behavior. They had a belief and a behavior. So basically, they had a sincerely held belief in the resurrection. And we're going to look at why I would say that. And then they had a driving ethic or a behavior of love. In its original sense, so kind of what we find with this original group was it wasn't about their religion. As a matter of fact, these were very religiously centered people. Like their ethnicity, their nation politically, and their religion were all very tied together. And so when people began to follow Jesus, this rocked them to the very core. And the reason they began to follow Jesus was because of a sincerely held belief in the resurrection of Jesus and a driving ethic, a behavior of love. And so let's look at that and see how maybe it can apply to our life and how maybe it can begin to change our life if we held these same things. So, first off, the sincerely held belief of the resurrection. Peter, who was one of these first people who kind of started, and Jesus really knew how to lead Peter. Peter was that guy who was always going to stick his foot in his mouth, but he was always going to speak up, right? And so Jesus, we see, kind of molded him into this person who would be kind of the lead person to speak up. And there's, on Jerusalem had descended during this festival was Jewish people from all over. And so these Jewish people who followed Jesus were going to come out with this message to these people that something has changed and something has happened. And look at Peter's message. He says, "People of Israel, listen. God publicly endorsed Jesus the Nazarene, or Jesus of Nazareth, by doing powerful miracles, wonders, and signs through him, as you well know." It's the idea of like this. You've heard about what's going on with this. This isn't a secret, right? People have shared the things that Jesus did. He said, but God knew what would happen, and his prearranged plan was carried out when Jesus was betrayed. With the help of lawless Gentiles, you nailed him to a cross. Remember, because he's talking to Jewish people. He's saying that the Jewish people and the Gentile people together nailed him to a cross and killed him. But God released him from the horrors of death and raised him back to life, for death could not keep him in its grip. And so we see right here in this very first message about who Jesus is, it comes down to this idea of him raising from the dead. And the reason why we believe that this is a sincerely held belief and this was core is we're going to continue, he's going to mention it again in this same message to people. He says, God raised Jesus from the dead, and we are all witnesses of this. You see, their faith wasn't based on hearing it from some faraway thing like ours is. They experienced the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus themselves. When he says we're witnesses, they had seen it. That's what a witness does, right? They see it, they hear it, they experience it, and this was their testimony, is that God raised Jesus from the dead. This wasn't some far-off thing. It had happened to them. They had experienced the life, death, and resurrection. They were witnesses. This was their testimony. Now he is exalted to the place of highest honor in heaven, at God's right hand. And the Father, as he has promised, gave him the Holy Spirit to pour out upon us, just as you see and hear today. And what he's talking about is that these people began to speak in the various language of the Jewish people that were coming in. And people thought they were drunk. Like literally what was said about them was, hey, this is like first thing in the morning. Why are you all drunk? And it's like, hey, they're not drunk. This is something else that is driving this. They're not being influenced by alcohol. They're being influenced by the Spirit of God through Jesus. And then again, he goes on to say this. So let everyone in Israel know for certain that God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, to be both Lord and Messiah. The resurrection confirmed something for them, and that's that word Messiah. Appointed one, anointed one, the one. The one that he's saying, like, listen, the Torah, the Old Testament prophet, everything that was pointing to this person that they were supposed to be looking for. The religious elite had conspired to kill. And the mob joined in, crucifying me, saying, this is the one that you killed. He was the Messiah. And here's how we know this, because God raised him from the dead. Right? This was a different, because there were a lot of people with a lot of Messiah campaigns. There were a lot of people who were trying to make a difference in Israel and claimed to be the Messiah. And a lot of them were killed on crosses. But one of them was raised from the dead. And this was their sincerely held belief that is if he was raised from the dead, right? It's like this. If I know a guy and I experience his life, I watch him die, I see him be buried, and then I see him after that, I'm going to follow that guy. Right? I'm just going to defer to that person because something's different about that person. And so we see they had a sincerely held belief in the resurrection. And then they wrote it down for us. Luke chronicles this story in the Gospel of Luke and then in the Acts of the Apostles. If you read them back to back, you see this. And so we see they had a sincerely held belief in the resurrection, but then they had a driving ethic. And there are maybe a lot of people who believe in a resurrection of Jesus in one way or another. But this driving ethic is that thing that I believe begins to separate the people who really follow Jesus and those who just associate themselves with this new religion, Christianity. Here's what we see. In Mark, Jesus asked the question, what's the greatest law? He's asked this several different times. He always had the response. He quotes from the Torah. He says, the most important commandment is this. Listen, O Israel, the Lord our God is the one and only Lord. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is equally important. Now this is interesting. It is second in succession, not in importance. Do we understand the difference there? This is something that when I realized this, it really mattered to me. Because there are a lot of people that are very religious that will say that they treat people poorly because of their love of God. And that is almost at the core of many different religions, right? I can treat this group poorly because I love God and I'm in and they're out. But he says the second is equally important. Equal in importance, second in succession. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. He summed up everything in two things. Love God with all you have and love your neighbor. And then one of the times when he's asked this, he's asked the question, I love to follow it. The guy says, well, then who's my neighbor? And Jesus begins to tell a pretty popular story, the story of the Good Samaritan, who was actually, the Samaritan people were hated. He makes the hated the hero in the story. And he shows how this hated person goes to the aid of a person who would have hated them and how the religious elite went around this person. And they were following the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. And Jesus basically says this, your neighbor is anyone who has a need that you can see and that you can meet. That's who your neighbor is. Your neighbor is that person you can show love and you can show mercy to. It's not just the understanding that they had of my neighbor is the Jewish person who's like me, this person who's a part of my tribe, this person who I view as in, not out. Jesus says, no, we're going to flip the whole thing on its head and we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves. I want you to think about that person who you view like that, right? That's just different. They're the unlovable. They're there, and you're like, yeah, I don't hate them, but maybe you're indifferent towards them. Maybe it's someone who's homeless. Maybe it's someone from another religion. Maybe it's someone from a different background. Jesus says, no, your neighbor is anyone I see who has a need that can be met by me. And then towards the end of his life, right before he's going to be crucified, Jesus is having dinner with his disciples, sitting at the table. And he says this to them. I think it's very important for us. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Now, very interesting. Imagine these people. Commandments came from God through Moses, and then this guy is saying, I'm giving you a new commandment. What he's saying there essentially, because commandments come from God, is that he is God, right? And again, we're going to fast forward to Peter, who's sitting at that table, tells everyone, listen, he's Lord, he's the Messiah, he's the one. Like he is everything he said he was, right? Because of the resurrection. So he says, I'm going to give you this new commandment. Love each other. Love each other. Now, we know that the 12 was there, and including the person who would betray him. But there were also, that room would have been full of people who were followers of Jesus. Men and women from all different kinds of backgrounds. And he says to them, love each other. How? Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. I wonder if they thought back to the time where Jesus showed them love. Right? I wonder if the woman who was there who began to wash his feet with her tears and was ridiculed, and Jesus came to her defense and said, no, what she's doing is important and it matters. I wonder if she heard that and thought, yeah, I remember how he loved me. I wonder if when Peter, after he denies Jesus before the crucifixion, and then Jesus comes back to him after he's raised from the dead, and they have breakfast, a fish breakfast by the sea, and Jesus says, hey, Peter, do you love me? And he probably remembered how Jesus loved him in spite of him denying him and turning his back on him. I wonder if when they heard him say, just as I have loved you, you should love each other, and thought to themselves, that's impossible. Jesus, your love has been undeniable. And he says this about it. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you're my disciples. So the disciple love, the follower love between you, when the world looks in, when the rest of the people look into this gathering, to this group, to people who follow me, and they see how they love just each other, it will prove that you follow this person who lived in perfect love. And so I want to talk about, like in the New Testament, this idea of each other. We see some of the New Testament writers begin to just take this further and explain this to every church and these followers as they come up, and basically we see things like this: forgive each other, accept each other, care for each other, encourage each other, submit to each other, restore each other, bear each other's burdens. This was the call to the people who followed Jesus, to each other. If you follow Jesus in here, I wonder, I want to encourage you in this. Find a group of other Jesus followers that you can each other with. Right? Find a group of people that you can forgive when they need forgiveness, because they're going to need forgiveness. People that you can accept when they seem very unacceptable at times. People you can care for, people you can encourage, people you can submit to, people you can restore, and people you can bear burdens with. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, wouldn't that be a great group to be a part of? If you're from the outside looking in, wouldn't that be something to see? Something special? It's what I want for Downtown Faith. When we think about this faith community here, this is what I want. A place where we can each other. And we can be this for each other. Because guess what? I need it. I need forgiveness. I need acceptance. I need burdens bared with me. We had a person who's part of this faith community here this morning early, just to have some people bear some burdens with her, because of some very real issues. And I was grateful that she saw this place and this group of people as a people that she could come to and pray with and vent to and ask for encouragement and help, bearing the weight of what she has going on in her life that matters and is important. And it requires this one thing from us, I think, to really hone in this laser focus of how to treat each other, and then how to love God, and how to love our neighbor, and then how to love each other. Simply this question: how should I love? How should I love? I want every one of us to start asking ourselves this question today. How should I love, right? In this situation. How should I love this person? Right? You know what person I'm talking about. How do I love this? How should I love this person? How should I love with my time? How should I love with my money? How should I love my community? How should I love my neighbor? How should I love when we disagree? How should I love in the face of injustice? What is my call to love? You see, the thing about a Jesus kind of love is it is other-centered and it is action-oriented. It is other-centered and action-oriented. I think a lot of people who say they follow Jesus, and maybe they're very religious in Christianity, they love from afar, or they love like the ones that are close to them in meaningful ways. And I'm sure I've experienced this in churches all over, where you truly feel love. But when it comes to our love getting bigger and getting brighter and becoming more like Jesus, it is other-centered and action-oriented. How should I love? And here's the thing. I think we become more other-centered and more action-oriented when we have a group of people that we can each other. And that's why I believe in a church, in a faith community. It's why we do this. It's why we're here every week and we want people to come be with us. It's why we go do the laundry projects. It's why we partner with Caridad Homeless Charities. It's because we want to do this together. We want to be other-centered and we want to be action-oriented. We want to ask the question, how should I love? Today in your discussion, I want you to ask your question, how should I love in this discussion? Because following Jesus is about a better way to live life and love others. When we see this resurrection, this second life, this renewed life, this picture for us spiritually to be reborn and new. Following Jesus is about a better way to live life. And when we see the message and the life of Jesus, the death of Jesus that is the greatest picture of love, we see a better way to love others. Following Jesus in faith, the life, death, resurrection, the message, the love of Jesus. This is what motivated the disciples. To be disciples and to go out and make more disciples. So we tell people here, I don't want to convert people to a new religion. No, I want to help people follow Jesus. I want to see their hearts change and new life possible because they follow Jesus. Not because they follow me, but because they follow Jesus. In his book, The End of Religion, Bruxy Cavey, it's a book I'm in right now and I'm really loving, says this: Jesus' goal for his followers is never just a life without obvious sin, but a life filled with genuine love. And so I would just ask you, how are you loving? And how can your love change and be more effective? How should you love? How should I love? If you want to know if someone's a Christian, you can ask them about their worldview. But if you want to know if someone follows Jesus, you can look at how they love. And my hope is that we would all follow Jesus in love, and where we mess up, we grace each other, we forgive each other, and we accept each other, and we restore each other back to a place where we can begin to love again and love better, love God, love our neighbor, and love each other. Now, for some of you, maybe you're like, oh, yeah, I'd never really wanted to be a Christian, but that actually, I could get on board with that. There's a Connect card at the tables there in the box. I just want to say this, maybe if today, for the first time, you're like, I feel like, yeah, like, I never want to be called a Christian, but I think I really want to follow Jesus. I'd like to take that step. I'd like to go in that direction. I'd love for you to fill out that Connect card. And on the back where it says other, just check that and just put like YES, right? And that'll let me know to contact you, talk to you more about that. If you're saying yes to following Jesus, maybe not yes to a religion, but yes to Jesus. And we'd love for you to let us know that so we can help you become a disciple and a learner and a follower of Jesus as best we can within this community of faith. Because following Jesus is about a better way to live your life and a better way to love others.